Hey, what's going on, TLC? It's your boy PT coming at you with the word of the week. I just wanted to share with you guys an answer, at least a short answer to the statement: is the Bible reliable? Is the Bible a reliable source, reliable document that we can look at? And I hope that this will help you, okay? So the main assumption here is the Bible is unreliable because it was written too far after the fact, too many years after the fact, and it was embellished, created into legends, and it was pretty much people were creating things to the people in power were adding or embellishing into it to accrue power. So two main issues that people have in terms of when it comes to the Bible is it was written too far after the fact, and it was written in a way that helped gain power for those in power. Okay, so how do we answer this? How do we begin to deal with this this issue? Is the Bible reliable? Today, I'm just going to really talk about just the reliability, at least the historical reliability of the Bible. Okay, and we're going to deal not with the whole Bible, with just the Gospels. Okay, and the reason why we're dealing with just the Gospel is this: the Gospel tells us about the life and works of Jesus Christ. And if the Gospels aren't reliable, then pretty much you can throw the whole thing out, right? But if the Gospel is reliable, then the Gospels in the life of Jesus Christ also talks about the rest of the Old Testament, all the other scriptures. So we really want to focus and hone on the Gospel. Are the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are they reliable historical sources of documents? Okay. So the first thing, it is reliable because the gospel is written too soon after the fact, actually. It wasn't written, the assumption is that it was written way too far after the fact, but the reality is it's actually written a lot sooner after the fact. I'll give an example. The book of Acts was written by Luke, which is where we get the Gospel of Luke from. Luke is the same author for both of those letters, right? From the Gospel of Luke and Acts. Acts talks about the life of Paul, the missionary life of Paul, his conversion and the work that he did all throughout Asia and Europe. Now, what was the main thing here? The book of Acts never talked about the death of Paul. Okay, you would think that if something was that important, at least it's talking about the whole entire journey of Paul, you would talk about his death. Because why? He probably didn't die in the writing of Acts. Now we know by documents wise, written by that we have, that Paul probably died around 64 to 68 AD, which means Acts had to be written before that. And if Luke was written before Acts, imagine that. So really, the Gospel of Luke, if anything, was written 30, 40 years after the fact, okay, max. And one of the things we know that Mark was written before Luke as well, because Luke and John, they drew from Mark. So Mark was written way before that. So what we have is we have the Gospels written maybe 30, 40 years maximum after the actual incident of Jesus Christ's life, death, and resurrection. Okay? Now, why is that important? Because it was written too soon for anyone to make up any stories. If they're going to make up things, there are many people around there that can corroborate and say, these aren't what happened. This account of Jesus' life was not true. They could have easily rebutted those things that are written by the Gospels, but it was written right after. So in the lifetime of those guys, so they knew that these things were written pretty much accurately. Okay. Secondly, the gospel was too counterproductive. See, the common argument is the Bible was used to accrue power. Now, if that was the case, it was written and it talked and described people in leadership that was foolish. They made look Peter, one of the leaders of the Christian movement, looked like an idiot, right? The account of the resurrection was given by testimonial by women. Women were the first eyewitnesses of the resurrection. Now, I know today, women, having such a higher, more equality, that it becomes like, not too easy for us to understand that their testimonies have weight. But back then, a woman's testimony had no weight. Very, very little to no weight at all. So if you were going to accrue power and say, did this happen? You wouldn't use this testimony of a woman to do it, especially if you want to gain into her power out of that. Okay. So first thing, the Bible was written, the gospel written really soon after the fact. Secondly, the gospel was actually very counterproductive to accrue any type of power. And thirdly, the way that the Bible was written, the way the gospel was written was not the literary form of legend, right? Back then, if you read things like historical epic novels like Gilgamesh, right? Those things were written in legend form. You can see the prose, you can see the phrasing of it. But the Gospels were written in terms of just clear narrative of what happened, right? Clear narrative of this happened, this happened, this happened. They were very detailed. There was things in there that you would read and say, well, this doesn't read like a novel, or at least an ancient novel. This reads like a testimonial. This reads like a historical bibliography almost from back then. Okay, so is the gospel reliable? Are the gospels reliable? The answer is yes. Historically, the gospel is very reliable. And if you're going to have this conversation with someone, that's a key thing you want to make sure that you get, is that you establish the foundation. The gospel is actually historically reliable. It is as historically reliable as any of the documents of that time. So if that's the case, then the real question is, what does the gospel say? What does the gospel talk about? It talks about the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Right? And so that's why, in terms of conversation, before we get into like topics like slavery, women's rights, gender equality, the homosexual debate, any of those things, before you get into like a huge debate, any of those topics, the real question we ask is it true? Did Jesus Christ actually rose from the dead? And if you read through the gospel, what you will see is you see this eyewitness account testimonial, right? Telling about the life and death of Jesus Christ. And that is true. If that's historically true and accurate, you may not have to believe it, but if it's historically true and accurate, it's reliable, then it has humongous effect upon your life if you actually look into it. So that's the thing we gotta look into first, is the gospel reliable? And the answer is, yes, it is. Have a great one, church. We love you.